Donald Trump and prominent MAGA Republicans were hit with instant, widespread, and richly deserved backlash for a series of highly politicized and blatant lies about the Biden-Harris administration's response to Hurricane Helene, which at the time of recording has devastated the Southeast and killed at least 116 people. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at in this video. Again, at the time of recording, Hurricane Helene has devastated the Southeast, killed more than 100 people. And I'm sure not only have you heard about it, you probably know people who have been seriously impacted by the hurricane, and perhaps you have been as well. Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans are seeking to make the situation even worse. So I should say that the federal government has responded responsibly and commensurately with how the Biden administration has responded in other natural disasters, including in predominantly red states. But that hasn't stopped prominent MAGA Republicans, including people like Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire, from claiming that the federal government has abandoned the states that have been ravaged by Hurricane Helene, when the fact of the matter is that's not true. And we've seen a series of pretty quick, widespread, and brutal fact checks and community notes and backlash directed at these MAGA Republicans, including Trump, about the lies that they've been telling. Matt Walsh says, unfortunately, the North Carolina flood victims are citizens of the USA, not Ukraine, so the Biden administration sees no reason to help them. And even on right-wing Twitter, this was hit with a pretty quick community note. This is false. President Biden 2 days ago already approved the North Carolina Disaster Declaration, which allows for extra help all over the state. The Biden administration has been incredibly responsible. And if you don't believe me, you're going to hear it from a Republican governor in just a second. RNC Research, which is one of the Trumpian elements of the official Republican National Committee and Convention and the entire GOP, it's one of the Trumpian social media pages, said this: it's a complete catastrophe in Asheville, North Carolina. Biden is at the beach and Kamala is too busy with her San Francisco fundraisers to notice. Again, not true. And so not true that top Republican pollster Frank Luntz felt the need to speak up. Several hours before these tweets, North Carolina was declared a federal major disaster, which means FEMA will rush aid to 25 plus affected counties and reimburse local governments and nonprofits for restoring facilities and infrastructure. Again, this is because President Biden and Vice President Harris have done the quick, responsible thing. And if you actually look at people's responses to Frank Luntz's tweet, they're upset. MAGA Republicans, your capping for this administration is abhorrent. Frank Luntz says, I'm just stating basic facts as documented by a local North Carolina news outlet. And he, ironically, posts a GIF of Ben Shapiro. Facts don't care about your feelings. Another person says 1,000 people are missing. How did this happen, Frank? As if it's President Biden's fault. Frank Luntz says there was a very big hurricane. That's the reason that people are missing. Andrew Bates, who is a White House spokesperson, also responded to the House Judiciary's official Twitter page. This is their official X page, folks. Not just a MAGA influencer. This is the Republican Party. This is what the House Judiciary GOP said. Joe Biden was at the beach. Kamala Harris was at a fundraiser. North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and Tennessee were abandoned. Andrew Bates said, POTUS signed disaster declarations for those states and surged resources to them ahead of the storm. It was preemptive. Biden was on the case. He and the vice president have been in touch with responders and state officials throughout, including Governors Cooper and Kemp, Roy Cooper being my Democratic governor of North Carolina, Brian Kemp being the Republican governor of Georgia, another state ravaged by Hurricane Helene. And we'll get to him in just a second. Unlike someone else, President Biden didn't dismiss it as, quote, a little hurricane, which Donald Trump did. President Biden gave public remarks about Hurricane Helene and the federal response, again, for which he is surging federal resources quickly, timely. He did so ahead of time. He approved everything that Republicans begged him to do in advance. On his way out from those remarks, an unknown reporter, we don't know who this person was. It could be Fox, it could be OAN, it could be News. I have no idea who it was. Asked this question of President Biden. I want you to hear Biden's 100% justified response.
Why weren't you and Vice President Harris here in Washington commanding this weekend?
I was commanding. I was on the phone for at least 2 hours yesterday and the day before as well. I command. It's called a telephone. And all my security people.
It's a 9.
He's right. The great thing about being the president of the United States is that even if you're not in the White House, you have a telecommunications array around you at all times. You are a mobile command center. Biden wasn't going to go there and shovel, dirt, or he wasn't going to try to reinforce dams himself. He's the president of the United States. He's 82 years old. What we do expect him to do is to be in touch with responders and officials who are the points of contact and to give them everything they need, which is within his power to give. He has done that. He has done the responsible thing. So I think his response here was sarcastic and appropriately fed up is more than 100% justified. Instead, what centrist media and right-wing media tries to do is move the goalpost. They did this, by the way, with the train derailment in East Palestine. Why didn't Biden go there? Anytime the president of the United States shows up, and quite frankly, former presidents as well, including Donald Trump, they show up to an emergency site, it diverts resources by definition because law enforcement has to go out of their way to clear the area and protect the principal. The president of the United States most of all, but again, even former presidents like Donald Trump and Barack Obama. So the responsible thing to do, in my opinion, and in the opinion of most people, is for presidents and people with power to exercise that power the most responsibly they can. And Biden is most helpful to people by staying out of those disaster zones, at least for the immediate time being. So all resources can be dedicated towards helping people and not protecting him. And instead, from a distance, on the phone, on Skype, on Zoom, whatever, making sure these people have the resources they need. That's what's important. And that's what Biden has done. And again, if you don't believe me, you're about to hear it directly from a Republican governor in an election year. But first, you're going to hear from Donald Trump because he's dishonestly suggesting that the Biden-Harris administration is not providing resources to the states affected by Helene. This is a lie, and he's going to be contradicted by Republican Governor Brian Kemp.
We do need some help from the federal government. They have to get together, ideally with the governor. That governor needs to, he's been trying to get them, and I'm sure they're going to come through. But he's been calling the president, hasn't been able to get him.
I just spoke, the president just called me yesterday afternoon. I missed him and called him right back. And he just said, hey, what do you need? And I told him, we got what we need. We'll work through the federal process. He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate that.
We do need.
So there you go. That is a Republican governor who is supporting Donald Trump for the presidency in an election year, publicly telling people that the president, Joe Biden, did reach out to him, asked him what he needs. Brian Kemp said, sir, we have what we need right now. Biden said, if you need anything else, reach out to me directly and I'll make it happen. And he was thanked by the Republican governor for doing it. Not the first time this has happened. There have been many natural disasters since Joe Biden became president. He has responded to them incredibly responsibly, especially in red states. And we're going to get to the contrast in just a second. But what's also frustrating about this is you have people, once again, grading Donald Trump on a curve. A CNN, not a Fox, a CNN reporter suggested that as a politician, Donald Trump is taking this seriously and offering a message of unity, to which the editor of the New Republic responded, said, oh my God, that's just sick. This is what Trump put out a few hours ago. This is what he said on social media. Don't like the reports I'm getting about the federal government and the Democratic governor of the state going out of their way not to help people in Republican areas, MAGA. They've left Americans to drown in North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and elsewhere in the South. Under this administration, Americans always come last. How exactly is that a message of unity? It's also a lie. It's also totally contradicted by the facts. My buddy Hutch, political content creator and streamer, co-host of Live and Learn, which we do every Wednesday. You all should definitely check it out. It's fun. Great content creator. He has been on this completely. He is going through debunking the various lies of MAGA Republicans suggesting that President Biden and the Biden-Harris administration have been negligent or disinterested, going through with one fact check after another about FEMA, about how quickly the Biden-Harris administration surged resources. So you should definitely check out his feed for just constant back-to-back updates. Somebody else pointed out that during Hurricane Matthew, when Trump was in office, 99% of the aid requested by North Carolina was denied by the Trump administration. Stark contrast to what usually happens under the Biden-Harris administration, in which the federal government reimburses them for the full price to the best of their ability. That's the contrast. I should also point out that when Trump was president, he repeatedly, publicly threatened to cut federal aid to blue states. even during COVID. So Trump threatens funding to Democratic-led cities over unrest. This is for the George Floyd protests, that the federal government's not going to get involved because Donald Trump doesn't like the way that they were handling the protests. Trump asked in late April of 2020, why should taxpayers help bail out blue states? Trump says coronavirus bailouts for blue states are unfair to Republicans. He said this on May 5th, 2020. And even as a former president who is running to be president again, he recently threatened to cut wildfire aid if California doesn't deliver more water. Governor Gavin Newsom said all Americans should be alarmed that the former president wants to, quote, block emergency disaster funds to settle political vendettas. I want to make this very clear. A couple of things. Someone who lives in North Carolina. The Biden-Harris administration is not perfect. If you have a valid criticism to make, by all means, make it. But it is a lie to suggest that President Biden and Vice President Harris did not surge federal resources to states affected by Hurricane Helene. They did so in advance. They continue to be in touch with people. Anyone who tells you otherwise is either a liar or an idiot, or perhaps both. Number two, Donald Trump, not Joe Biden, repeatedly publicly threatened to use federal funding and federal disaster relief and federal aid as a cudgel to hurt his political opponents, threatening to withhold it or suspend it or reduce it in order to extract political consequences from his enemies. President Biden has never done that. Florida has been hit with multiple natural disasters under the Biden administration. Biden didn't threaten or suggest or hint that he was going to block federal aid from a Republican-led state, led by Governor DeSantis, of all people, one of the most repulsive Republicans in existence. Instead, Biden immediately surged and granted them everything they needed because he is a better person than every single Republican politician. Joe Biden is a better man, a better president, a better executive, a better person. He is superior in intellect and morality. He is a better human being than every Republican politician in this country, particularly MAGA Republican politicians. And you see the contrast right there of how the Biden-Harris administration handles these things compared to the Trump administration. But here's the real tragic thing. These MAGA Republicans are being fact-checked. But of course, it's easier to proliferate a lie than proliferate the truth or debunk a lie. So unfortunately, I have no doubt that there are many people laboring under the belief in these states that the federal government has abandoned them. It is not true. And it's incumbent on all of us to ruthlessly fact check these MAGA Republican liars, because their lies are not only egregious, they're potentially dangerous. And there's an election coming up. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.